aandoen? Yeah? Great. Goedemiddag allemaal. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Berber van Woude. Welcome to this event at Pakhuis de Zwijger. We're fully, how do you call it? Fully booked. So it's a very good day to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. We have a very interesting lineup. I'm very happy, though it would have been so much greater to have you here physically, to welcome Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah, who will be joining us from Glasgow. Are you in Glasgow, Ghassan? Oh, sorry. He's still there. I will introduce you properly later, but it's very nice to have you here. We will have a session of about 2 hours with 2 themes. Of course, the destruction of the healthcare system and the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, and the suppression of Palestinian solidarity in Europe. And in between those two, we will have a very nice intermezzo by Sobhi Khatib, our storyteller. Very excited to have a bit of air into very difficult topics. Just before we begin, I would like to establish some, I'm not a big fan of rules, but at least ways to make this session as enjoyable as possible, or enjoyable might not be the good word, but as acceptable as possible. We will do a round of questions at the end of the session, so please hold back. And then also, if you want to intervene, make it a question and not a statement. The statement is for the people who will be invited on the podium, on the stage. Well, and if you intervene, I would like to ask you to do it respectfully. The rule is hating is leaving, so there's no place for racism, anti-Semitism, misogynism, transphobia, whatever kind of hate. And I will be quite strict on that. And hating is leaving. We have 2 people from the security, Hamdi and Peter, in the back. And they will be very helpful if things get rough. I'm watching you. Okay, my last remark is this type of event sometimes is, talking about hate, is being infiltrated by people that have that not always come with good intentions. It happens. We have nothing to be ashamed of. This is a topic we should discuss. If you feel unsafe, or if you feel unpleasant because someone behaves in a way that you think, this is not right, just give someone a sign. Let's see. Oh, I was thinking maybe Michiel or something, but we have Hamdi and Peter then as well. They are very important for this session. That will be, I think, the way to make this this afternoon together as good as possible and as rewarding as possible as well. Now, without further ado, I would like to go to the first panel, and I would like to invite, my first guest on stage. That's Sara Galli. Sara is an anesthesiologist in The Hague. She is working for, basically not working for but doing a lot of work for Artsen voor Gaza, Doctors for Gaza. Their aim is to end the violence and to promote the protection of healthcare workers, to promote the access of emergency aid and emergency medical workers to Gaza, and she's focusing mainly on the Dutch situation, of course. Can I get a big applause for Sara Galli? Well, and then our guest of honor, I may say, Ghassan Abu-Sittah. There he is. Ghassan is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. He's Palestinian-British, and he's also director of the University of Glasgow. He's been working in several war zones: Yemen, Syria, South Lebanon, and also Gaza in previous, during previous rounds of Israeli attacks and violence. On the 9th of October, he went to Gaza to work for 43 days in a row, day and night. He worked, amongst others, in Al-Shifa and Al-Ahli hospitals. And he is also having a role as doing a testimony for the International Criminal Court. He got a Schengen ban when he tried to enter Berlin for the Palestine Congress there. They managed with a lot of legal work to get the ban lifted, but unfortunately other restrictions kept him again far from us. But he will be here virtually, and I'm very honored to welcome Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah. Dr. Abu-Sittah, or may I say Ghassan?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Welcome in Amsterdam. The first thing I would like to ask you is, you decided to travel to Gaza immediately after the Israeli, basically destruction of Gaza began. What was your cue to go there?
So, I think, like a lot of people, by the end of the day of the 7th of October, I'd come to the realization that we were going to face a major assault on Gaza. At that time, having been in Gaza during the 2014 war, I felt that it probably was going to be a worse version of the 2014 war, but nothing like what I had seen. And previous experiences in Gaza and in previous wars have always taught me that borders are the biggest manifestation of bureaucratic momentum. And so you can always get in the first 24 to 48 hours before the messages come from the center to the border crossing to shut down or stop people entering. And so I felt that I probably had until midday Monday to go in before the shutters came down. And that was very true. I mean, I was in Gaza on the 11 o'clock on the Monday morning, and the Israelis bombed the crossing at around 1 o'clock. And so that was the decision that the reason why I went in, because I felt that, and I was right, the first outside team came in only towards the end of November, December, when there was the first ceasefire.
So that was a very good call. And also, you were immediately locked in then, basically, there. So can you tell us a little bit about, because for us, it's been a lot of, many of us have seen images of what happened on our TV and phone screens, but can you give us a description of what you saw, because you were really there in the middle of it?
So on the first day, Monday, we were pinned down in a house for that night. There were, the night of Monday, the 9th, there were 350 air raids on Gaza City. And I didn't make it into Shifa Hospital until the Tuesday morning, when I walked to Shifa Hospital from where I was staying. And it was at Tuesday when I started to go around and see the patients with my colleagues in the burns unit. It became apparent that even by Tuesday, 2 or 3 days on, the hospital had already become almost full. And what was also quite disturbing is that as a result of the siege that had been imposed on Gaza for over 16 years, the health system was already short of a lot of very basic things. I recall the first patient going to see was a teenage girl that had around 60-70% burns as a surface area of her body. And we didn't have the disinfectant that we need to clean the burns to stop them from becoming infected. And we ended up cleaning her with regular soap. And that kind of set the tone for a system that was already on its knees when the war started. And then what happened was just a tsunami of injury. The whole of Gaza Strip had 2,500 beds going into this war. But by the end of the second week, there were around 6,500 wounded. And so it kind of shows you how very quickly the system was completely submerged and unable to cope just with the sheer number of the wounded because of the bombing that was happening. And this is before the 17th of October, when the program to destroy the health system began. So even before the 17th of October, the numbers exceeded the capacity of the system to treat them.
And because you've been to Gaza also with previous rounds of violence, this was really different, right? Can you tell us in what way it was so different?
I think the difference is the difference between a flood and a tsunami. And the flood includes my time in Mosul, my time in Damascus, the 2014 war, the 2009 war. It's just, to give you a kind of example of the scale, I would operate from 8 o'clock in the morning to around 1 o'clock the following morning. And so I would manage to do between 8 and 12 surgeries that day. But in that time, the ambulances were coming every minute or two to Shifa Hospital, each ambulance with 4 or 5 wounded. And so whatever you were doing was such an infinitesimally small part of the sheer magnitude of what you were facing. And so by the beginning of the first week, by the middle of the first week, just as a small department, because plastic surgery is a small department in Shifa, as a small department, we'd already had 120 patients waiting to go to the operating room that had not been operated on and had exceeded the time limit where clinically you should be operating on these patients.
How did you cope? Because of course you're used to horrible scenes and to working under pressure, but it must have been very, very, very heavy for you as well, right? Your family is also from Gaza, right? So it also touched you in the heart, I imagine. How did you cope with that?
I think during the day you're so overwhelmed by the need to get one patient off the table, get the other patient on the table, trying to kind of organize the team and work with the team that you're working with so that you can optimize the number of people who are active at any time. Because, you know, there are times when I would be in the burns unit operating so that my colleague would go to the other operating rooms and work with some of the other surgeons in other specialties. And so you kind of, you're so busy during the day that the day goes by very quickly. But there are moments which take you aback when you hear, usually it's not the kind of injury, it's the stories of people and their lives and the way their lives have been shattered, not just their bodies have been broken. And or when you go to the emergency department and you see the horror in people's faces as they're looking for their loved ones. And sometimes that horror is in the faces of your colleagues because they've heard that there was an air raid on their neighborhood and they're trying to see whether their loved ones, their children, their families have been brought in. And then as the time went on, starting to hear of colleagues that lose family members, and then starting to lose colleagues. You know, Dr. Midhat Saydam, who was a plastic surgeon who was working with us. One afternoon, his sister came to the hospital with her children, trying to run away from the bombing in their neighborhood, and he had just said, "Things seem to be under control here. I'm just going to take her to our house because my other siblings are there and my parents are there." and he never came back. They bombed that building that his whole family was in, and he was killed along with his parents and his siblings and his sister and her kid. So that was also still before the 17th of October. And then when the 17th of October started, and that is the day the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital was hit by a missile with 483 killed outright, and then others who died from their wounds. That was the big end of the brutal war. I mean, for me, I remember now looking back, realizing that moment, coming out of the emergency department at Shifa, having transported one of the the wounded and transported the last of the wounded, kind of thinking this is the end of the war and the beginning of genocide. Until then, it was just a very severe, very bad, very cruel war. But then the hospital was bombed for the first time. And the narrative about Shifa having all of these underground bunkers and the militarization of the health system as a way of justifying the attack. And then after the attack on Al-Ahli, the destruction within a few days of 3 children's hospitals, and then the tanks bombing Al-Quds hospital, which was run by the Palestine Red Crescent Society. And so realizing that on this night of the 17th of October, we crossed from a war into a genocide.
That's really horrible. And did you also notice that then the type of wounds and of injuries that you were treating were changing as well? Because there was also I have to check, the ground war started around then as well, right? So I imagine it's also different types of patients coming in at a different pace probably as well.
So what happened once the ground invasion happened is we started to see white phosphorus. First in the wounded escaping the north. So a 13-year-old boy and his father, I remember, were the first phosphorus. And I had seen phosphorus burns in Gaza during the 2009 war. And then again, we saw it when they started to shell Shatit refugee camp. And then as people tried to escape Shatit, they fired phosphorus bombs at them. And then you'd see other weapons, and then you don't understand how the injury happens, and then you start seeing a pattern. So they were using, and then in retrospect realized that that's what they had used at Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. They were using what's called a Hellfire Ninja missile, which is a missile that fragments immediately into discs, metal discs that explode horizontally at the surface and are able to kind of, they're referred to euphemistically as anti-personnel. They create amputations and injuries that are very distinctive. And then eventually you see, when we were towards the end stuck in, isolated in Ahli Hospital, quadcopters, and these are the small drones with a sniper gun that they would send to the vicinity of the hospital and sometimes into the grounds of the hospital to shoot at people trying to get into the hospital from outside. And so with each, and because I have had 25 years of experience as a war surgeon, and because academically as a researcher I have an interest in war injuries, you see injuries which don't make sense, and then eventually you see them being repeated, and then you find out about the weapon. And so it's obvious that one of the things that was happening is that there are weapons being tried out and weapons being advertised. We have to understand that one of the aims of a Gaza war for the Israeli weapons industry is to research and advertise weapons production. And we see that with the quadcopters, because if you look at the website of the company called Extend that manufactures quadcopters, it's now using what they call battle-tested products to look for $40 million of dollars in funding to expand the realm of quadcopters as a result of the success that they've had in this war.
That's so cynical, horrible. I would like to ask a question to Sara,
Yes.
joining us from Artsen voor Gaza. I was wondering because, well, of course, you got how you got like people such as Ghassan and other people providing information to you as a healthcare professional from Gaza. So how did Artsen voor Gaza come across?
Well, it actually started with a group that was already active with providing help and medical relief in cases of catastrophes and wars, amongst other during the earthquake in Turkey. And then when Gaza happened, there were some people, some doctors that said, well, you know, this is one of the things that falls within our expertise. What could we do to help? And there wasn't really a space to talk about it. It was very quickly shut down and put aside as, well, it's complicated and let's skip this one. And so a group of that decided to branch out on their own and created Doctors for Gaza. And it has now grown to a couple of hundred active members with not only doctors, but also nurses and pharmacists. And over 5,000 followers on social media. And what we are trying to do is, from our perspective as healthcare workers here, see how we can help. And our first instinct would be to bring people and bring materials, but due to the circumstances, it's impossible to get anything in. So the next step then is advocacy, which means using our voices as healthcare providers to say healthcare is not a target, to say the attacks that are now being seen in Gaza is something we've never seen before, is a complete breach of international humanitarian law. And we as doctors, we as medics will call that out again and again and again. And calling for a ceasefire, calling for the respect of healthcare facility according to international law, and hopefully one day for the rebuilding of the healthcare sector, because the healthcare sector has been brought to his knees with 25 hospitals completely destroyed, annihilated, over 100 ambulances targeted, not by carpet bombing, but very precise bombing, despite the fact that every single time that a hospital goes out, they provide their location to the army. And that means that there were entire regions of Gaza, and still now, that are inaccessible for ambulances, which means that while the hostilities go on, there are people left to die on the side of the road or stuck behind rubble that could otherwise have been saved.
Thank you. So, Ghassan, this type of movements in countries throughout the world, because I think this type of organization also was happening in other countries.
Yes.
What is that important for the people, for the healthcare professionals in Gaza? Do they feel that as a sign of solidarity? How do they react to that, or is it just like they're completely isolated of the world and don't really notice this?
No, absolutely. I mean, I remember being in Shifa when the first major demonstration happened in London, and the relief that it brought, that Israel tries to create this death world that you inhabit, and you suddenly hear about the rest of the world reaching out. And we saw how people received the news about the student movement and the student encampments in Europe and North America, people in Rafah, and them writing messages back to the students on their tents so that the students can feel that. Absolutely, it's that sense of isolation and being completely bereft that the Israelis try to enforce on people in Gaza. And they're doing that now. The first thing that they did is to send a tank to have its photo opportunity taken inside the Rafah border, to give the Palestinians the message that they're hermetically sealed from the outside world and that there's nothing that's going to reach. And the critical component about these movements, and these movements, particularly with regards to healthcare, have also been driven by the fact that there is official collusion from the official or the quasi-official medical establishment. You know, I don't know the situation in Holland, but I'm sure that it's not much better than the UK. But in the UK, the Royal Colleges of surgeons or physicians or pediatricians or psychiatrists have remained eerily silent. When Palestinian members of these royal colleges were killed, at best, all we can do was getting a bland statement that mourns the death of Dr. Ahmed Maqadme, who was in the Royal College of Surgeons, as if he was run over by a car or had an accident. And the British Medical Association, which is supposed to be the union, is refusing to put pressure on the Israeli Medical Association, because for the fact that the Israeli Medical Association is allowing its members to participate in the torture and the forced medical treatment of Palestinian detainees in Israeli prison, you know, detainees from Gaza, and has not censored over 150 Israeli doctors who wrote and signed a petition at the beginning of the war calling on the Israeli army to bomb Shifa Hospital because it's a base for Hamas. So, you know, these groups are an alternative to what, you know, I refer to as genocide enablers, institutions and individuals within health profession whose job has been to ensure that the voices of the victims are never heard, the witnesses are silent, and that the genocide can continue unhindered.
Thank you. So, Sara, did this type of collision or this, well, you already described that there was a certain amount of discomfort, let's put it like that, but do you have the impression that there's also this type of collision, or?
We have a situation where there is a difference between the healthcare workers and the healthcare organizations. And the healthcare organizations so far have not taken a stance. Or if they have, it's been a very bland kind of statement like, oh, well, it's awful what's happening to both parties. And I think that people don't quite realize that when they're saying it's awful what's happening to both parties, what they're actually saying is that a Palestinian life is worth so much less than an Israeli life. Because if we look just at numbers, for every child that was killed on the 7th of October, Israel has killed over 450 children. So when institutions or people, and even some friends of mine, with the best of intentions say it's very bad on both sides, they're saying that one Israeli child that's died is just as much of a drama, just as deserves as much attention, outrage, empathy as 450 Palestinian children. That is what you're saying every single time you're saying both sides. And what we are saying is we're saying, no, we need to talk, we need to treat first what kills first. And the ones that are being killed first are Palestinians, are healthcare workers. We have over 500 healthcare workers that have been died. We have a huge amount of healthcare workers that have been arrested and tortured. Some of them have told their stories, like Dr. Marloes, a pediatrician who was tortured for 45 days to the point that he wished for death and lost 25 kilos in that time because they starved him. And the day after his release, not knowing whether his children and his wife were still alive, he went back to work to help the children of Gaza. And we have a story of doctors that refused to abandon their patients, that were taken prisoner by the IDF, tortured, and died while prisoner. We are hearing stories from Israeli doctor colleagues that are sounding the alarm that the torture is so widespread that it has now become routine to perform amputation on previously completely healthy people because their hands and their feet are bound 24/7 for weeks and months on end. That's a situation we're in, and if this were happening in any other part of the world, I cannot imagine that we would have let it come this far as an international community without condemning this in the strongest term, having severe sanction, and probably even military action. So I think that that's why it's important that we here in Europe can be the voices for those people that are not given a voice. One of the doctors that we were in contact with at the Nasser hospital, one of his last voicemail before he fell off the radar, he said, "I hope I get to see my daughter one last time." And he said, "I hope we do not get forgotten." The biggest fear is because a lot of people have almost even accepted they're going to die. But the fear is that it will be just another bleep on the radar and we will go on with life as it was before and they will be forgotten. And we do not know what became of him and his other colleagues. He might be one of the 50 corpses that was found in the mass graves of Nasser Hospital. Or he might be one of the doctors that is still now being tortured.
That's horrible. Yeah, this selective indignation is probably something, Ghassan, that must frustrate you very much when you, for example, saw what the indignation throughout the world when the world's central kitchen workers had been targeted and killed. How did you look at the way the world reacted then?
One of the most difficult things to come to terms with is that had Israel killed 15,000 puppies or kittens rather than 15,000 Palestinian children, the outrage within, let's say, Western communities would have been deafening. Literally, if you just imagine Putin deciding to kill 15,000 kittens or 15,000 puppies, the reaction would have been versus 15,000 Palestinian children. I think we have to accept that part of the problem is the racialization of Palestinians, which makes them ungrievable. The racialization of people from the Southern Hemisphere, brown people, Arabs, Muslims, has made Palestinian children ungrievable in the eyes of big sectors of society, and less grievable in the eyes of other sectors of society. And so not totally ungrievable, but less grievable. And so what happened is the insulting thing about the outrage in the central kitchen attack is it reinforced this idea that Israel had been killing health providers, UN workers, humanitarian workers throughout this whole war. It then killed 7 or 8 white health care workers, and suddenly there's an outrage, and then it becomes a crisis. And then the crisis is very quickly swept under the carpet with the collusion of the NGO that sent them. So you kind of move on, and that's what Israel does. It creates a crisis as a tester for a campaign. So you hit Al Ahli Hospital, which is run by the World Council of Churches and run out of the Anglican Church in the UK. And then you see the reaction, and the reaction is all right. Then you roll out the program. You torture Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, the head of orthopedics at Shifa Hospital, to death. You kill him. And you choose someone who had been trained in the UK with connections to the outside world, and then you just wait and see what the reaction is. And if the reaction is okay, then you start eliminating these doctors as part of a program to kind of wipe out all of the witnesses to a lot of the crimes that have happened. You do that again with you know the attacks on humanitarian workers, and then you see whether there's a reaction, and then you stop. That's why there were no more attacks after the reaction to the healthcare, the central kitchen. These are not random acts of uncontrolled violence. These are litmus tests to the resolve of the international community for specific incidents.
Wow. So let's have a look at your role, Ghassan, in testifying for the ICC case, because well, the story has been that might have played a role in forces trying to keep you out of the Schengen area. How did you? Like, was this was probably not the first time you had some issues moving around or speaking up. Can you tell us a little bit about the difficulties you encountered to make your voice heard and move around, please?
So the harassment started while I was still in Gaza. Within a few days of me being in Gaza and appearing on some media outlets, the anti-terrorist police came and harassed my family here and asked really uninnocent questions. Asked my wife which room I was sleeping in Shifa Hospital and which department, and if she was shown a diagram, would she be able to tell where in Shifa Hospital I am? And then when I came out, there's a kind of, the usual campaign by organizations like UK Lawyers for Israel and by the right-wing press and by pro-Israeli newspapers like the Jewish Chronicle. And then I had an invitation to speak at this Congress in Berlin. I arrived in Berlin and was told by the authorities, both verbally and in writing, that I'm not allowed to go into Germany for the month of April. And this was confirmed by documents that they gave me, and I was sent back from Germany. And then there was the engagement to speak at the French Senate at the invitation of senators had been pre-planned, and I went to France really having no idea that there was a Schengen-wide ban. At Charles de Gaulle, I was told by the passport officer that the Germans had put in an administrative Schengen-wide ban for me to enter any country in the Schengen. And because it's an administrative ban, which had been brought in, and I remember it had been brought in to manage football hooligans trying to move from one match to the other. They didn't have to inform me. They didn't have to show it to a judge. And that only the German government can remove the ban, but that different governments had the right to create an exception for their own country in defense of their own sovereignty. And so by the end of the day, it had become apparent to myself and the French parliamentarian that the French government was not going to create an exception. I then was sent back to London. And then you realize that, and then the issue of traveling to Holland came up, because that was already also pre-planned, and I was supposed to be at the Palestinian embassy on the 15th of March, and then speaking to parliamentarians and speaking to yourselves. I had a meeting with the head of the UN Agency for Chemical Weapons to discuss the use of white phosphorus. And the Dutch Foreign Ministry informed the Palestine ambassador that they had no intention of lifting the ban, and therefore that was luckily the lawyers in Germany, Alexander Gorski and the European Center for Legal Support, had managed to overturn. The minute the ban was shown to a judge, it was overturned. And then you realize that actually, the body of the brown man is the border in Europe, not the geographical borders. That Fortress Europe is made out of where the bodies lie, not where the topography lies on the map. And that the struggle between those who wish a Europe that is open and where there's freedom of expression, freedom of movement, versus those who long for a racialized Fortress Europe.
Your sound is dropping a little bit. You might have issues with your computer.
With my mic. Yeah,
or maybe be low on battery on your headphones. I don't know.
Yeah.
do you expect more barriers for you to move around and to speak your testimony, because you have an important voice. You were there in the first days of course of the well, when the destruction started, and you have important testimony about cluster munition, white phosphorus, that is really relevant in when it comes to legal proceedings against Israel. And what are your expectations?
Oh, the campaign will continue. The campaign will continue. Organizations involved in what they call lawfare, like UK Lawyers for Israel, are a continuation of the Israeli security establishment, and they use the courts to try to do everything from have you barred from the Charity Commission from holding any kind of office in a charitable organization, to going after doctors and having their medical licenses revoked. So the battle will continue, because 76 years of total impunity has been shattered. And it's that impunity that intoxicated the Israeli leaders at the beginning of this war to openly verbalize their genocidal intentions as set out in the ICJ by the South African team. They had been drunk on that 76 years of total impunity afforded to them by Europe and North America, that they told us that they wanted to wipe out people in Gaza, that they want to ethnically cleanse Gaza, that they want to drop a nuclear bomb on Gaza, that this is the Nakba 2. All of these things that we heard being catalogued by the South Africa team are as a result of that impunity that now has been shattered. As Palestinians, none of this surprises us. It's just that the world is listening for the first time. And that is what's terrifying Western governments and the pro-Israel lobby within these Western governments. And that's why we saw the brutality in Amsterdam University by the police. We've seen it by the French police against the students. And that's why 2,200 students in the United States have been imprisoned, more than when China cracked down on the student movement in Hong Kong, more than any other student revolution in the globe. There have been more students, because suddenly that complete control of the narrative has been shattered. And therefore, these powers that have been used to that complete control of the narrative and being able to give Israel its impunity, because we need to understand that the impunity is not intrinsic in Israel because of just the nature of Israel and its history. It's intrinsic for the reasons that the Colombian president said when he voiced his support to the Palestinian people. What is being done to Gaza is a message to people in the southern hemisphere across the globe that if you try to change the rules of engagement, this is what will be done to you. That he said that Gaza is being made an example of to frighten the rest of us.
Yeah, that's a bleak analysis, but yeah, thank you. The Artsen for Gaza people, the Doctors for Gaza people, I mean, do they encounter similar? I mean, this is an extreme case probably of suppression of rights, but do they encounter?
Can I just say, 63 doctors are under investigation by the General Medical Council to have their licenses withdrawn.
In Britain?
This is not in Britain. This is not an extreme case.
Oh.
A similar process has been happening to junior doctors in the United States and in Canada, where people have been thrown out of their jobs, put on forced administrative leave, just based on just voicing support to Palestinians on social media. It's not, but suddenly the world is seeing it, and that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. It's incredible, because in the case of Ukraine, I think nobody had a problem with doctors voicing their. How is it in the Netherlands, Sara?
Well, I think it's especially Ukraine makes it because it's so recent. And it was very blatant that when there was Ukraine, all the medical societies voiced their support. When there was Ukraine, there were hospitals that showed the flag of Ukraine on their buildings to show their support. And there was this very clear outcry of principle, like we as human beings and as doctors cannot condone this, and we hope for a swift end of these atrocities. And there's this very weird situation where we have a situation that is 40 times worse than Ukraine ever was. I mean, there's really no comparison. And yet, if you just say I'm against genocide, I'm against the attacks on healthcare workers, I'm against the massive killing of children. There's been more children killed than in the last 4 years in the entire world. All the conflicts of the world combined. In 4 years is less children dead than now in 7 months in Gaza. I mean, this is really something that we've not seen in our lifetimes. And yet we see that there's a lot of pushback, a lot of avoidance, a lot of accusations. We see that very much online, that accusation of, oh, well, do you support Hamas then? Are you anti-Semitic? Just like the classic Pavlov conditioning that's been going on for a while. And it's apparently something very hard to get out from. And I think that people don't realize, and institutions don't realize, that the long-term consequences of not standing up for principles, because what it's showing to the world is it was never about the principle, it's about the people. And when the victims were white and blonde and Christian, we have no problems as doctors taking position. And the same organization that took position for Ukraine say now, well, it's too political, we don't do politics, so we cannot take a position for that. And it very much reminded me of a bit by Trevor Noah that talked about the social contract that we have as a society. And that when the people in power do not respect their own principles, it breaks the social contract and it breaks the fabric of society in a way.
That sounds like a good analysis. Ghassan, we will not take too much more of your time because you are a very, very, very busy man. Though I hope you will be able to stick around a bit more. But I would like to ask you one final, perhaps a big question. But will you be going back to Gaza?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, at the end of the day, no one has the right to stop me from going to Gaza. I have the duty of care towards my patient and towards my people to serve them. I have a particular I don't know what grammatically to say it. The duty is heightened by the fact that I have over 25 years of experience in war surgery, that I academically have an interest in war injuries, and therefore my experience over those years would come in much use, and therefore I will be going back the minute Rafah opened. I was here for to support my family. My kids are going through kind of milestone exams this year, so one of the reasons I came out is I didn't want to have them worry about me while they were trying to sit these exams. But once these exams are done, I'm going back to Gaza. Now, a friend of mine joked that, you know, if they won't let you into Berlin, do you really think they'll let you into Gaza? But we'll see. We will not self-censor. We will push forward until we are stopped.
Thank you so much, Ghassan, Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah, for joining us, for sharing your testimony with us, but also for speaking up, and also for your incredible courage in doing your profession under most difficult of circumstances, to be with your people, but in the end it's our people, right? We are all people. And it's so beautiful that we could have you here, and I would like to thank you very much. And also Sara for doing a bit of, it feels a bit like an extension of like a social contract between all healthcare workers and doctors worldwide, right? To speak the truth about what's happening there, and that we have to take care of our humanity. And this is a very important and beautiful way of doing it. So thank you very much for your bravery, your courage, and your work. Thank you so much. So I'm very happy to invite our next guest on stage. It has been, when I was thinking about what can we do to make a bridge between the two panels, I thought we need something, a bit light, not denying the heaviness of the topics we're talking about, but we shouldn't forget that besides being victims of great injustice and terrible violence, besides being freedom fighters, Palestinians are also people leading normal lives under not normal circumstances. And then I came across, or actually a very good Palestinian poet advised me, you should go and have a look at the videos of Subhi Khatib. Subhi is a public speaker and a storyteller, and he tells stories about normal life, but also always with the backdrop of Palestinian life and of occupation and Nakba and the memory of longing for a place you're not able to return to. So we are now going from Gaza to Haifa and Jerusalem, and I would like to invite Subhi on stage to tell his story, which is called Onions. Subhi, please giving him a round of applause.
Thank you, Berber. Yeah, what a difficult mission I have now. Just to clarify, I'm not a comedian, so the goal is not to make you laugh, but I hope I will make you smile. I would like to have an answer to a question before I start. How many of you like onions? Oh, wow! We have a big audience of onions lovers. Great. I hope I will give you more reasons to like onions. So, the story starts actually about 15 years ago when I was much younger, I was 23. And I was on my way to a protest when I was told, stop, what's in the bag? Onions. Okay, pass. Little they knew that was onion for illegal purposes. I took the onions to a demonstration in the back lines of that demonstration. In that protest, my role was to be the onion guy. For those who don't know much about this, my name is Subhi. I'm from Palestine. I was born in Nazareth. My dad is part-time carpenter. My mom is not married. And I get confused sometimes because of the beard. But one of the things we can do is to protest sometimes. And whenever we want to protest, we always will start, there will always be the beating, but then sometimes will be some tear gas and sometimes bullet with rubber and then other things. But as an onion guy, your role is basically to be in the back lines when the tear gas started being dropped, and then someone would pass this person who was affected by the tear gas to the back lines to reach the onion people and you will be in a station. And that's how I met Ifrat. So I was basically in one of those stations, and people will be like coming, and they cannot really see. Like the tear gas just like burns your eyes that you cannot see, and it just burns. And one of the things you can do is you cut the onion, and freshly you give it to the person, and they just put it very close to their nose and eyes, and that makes the burn a bit less. And so I was there on my mission, and I was doing my job, when Aya handed me Ifrat, and she said, take care of her. And Ifrat, I just handed her the onion like any other person, and she's like, who are you? Who are you? You know, with like, I'm like, Subhi. Oh. And I was like, when I heard her speaking, it was Arabic, but with an Ashkenazi accent. So I was, and what's your name? Who are you? Ifrat. Oh, I heard about you from Yara and Bakri. She's like, yeah, you're that Subhi. Okay, do you have a cigarette? Yeah, sure. I lighted the cigarette and I gave it to her. And we started talking. Ifrat is my height with this blonde hair that is a bit curly, and we started talking about what's happening in the protest now. And it was literally a blind date, from one side at least. And we continued like talking and discussing on what's happening here. And then slowly, the heat of the protest was going down, and then we moved to a cafe in Haifa. And in Haifa, you sit there, and all the other people who were joining those protests will come. And you will have the different figures. You will have the angry Majd, who's just talking about how horrible those security forces were and what they did. And you have Yara, who talks about like the heroism of this person and that person, and how we all like stood together and we could do this and could do that. And you find everyone is just like engaging, and you see their characters so amplified, sometimes with the alcohol as well, and with the cigarettes, and with the shouting. But you also see people like me and Ifrat who are engaging in those conversations, but also looking at each other's eyes and smiling a bit, knowing that there is a bond that is getting formed. And this bond is stronger than onion, but that's not like something to be said here. It's more about really like how you have all of those gathering, just building those connections and relations. A few years later, I got to know Elena in a garlic event, but that's another story. And with Elena, we moved to Jerusalem. And before moving to Jerusalem, one of the things that I remember from my talks with Ifrat was how much she hated Jerusalem. She was born in Jerusalem, but she said how much she couldn't handle it. And I have visited Jerusalem up to that point a few times. I didn't really like it, but I didn't have anything against it. And I didn't understand why she was so much against Jerusalem. So when I moved with Elena to Jerusalem, I started understanding a bit. We moved to the middle, the green line. And this is one of the things that you don't really notice when you look at maps. You know, you look at the map and you see the line, and this is the west and this is the east. But we don't really look into the zooming in into a map and see that there are houses on those lines. So the house that we were living in was on the green line. It was one of those houses also that didn't really have an address really, which made it hard for pizza deliveries. But it was really one of those places where you are in a place where it's really difficult to know where do you belong and how are you situated. Jerusalem for me was a hard place to be in, not only because of the tension and of the occupation that is more into your face than in Haifa, but because of my job. So I was working there with UNRWA. And my job was to document the violations that happens in Palestinians' lives because of the wall, because of the separation wall that was there. And going through houses and asking people, so how is your life? And they're like, well, it's horrible, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, but I need details, for the report. And they will start telling you details. And I was just crying the first few days of every single thing I'm hearing. I'm a Palestinian, and I have been through a lot, and I learned human rights, and I know about many violations, but when you start meeting people and hearing every single story and every single thing, and you're writing it down, and you cannot do anything except just documenting it, you just fill up. But unfortunately, also with that comes the kind of like the resilient, or something that makes your protection layer thicker. You're like, okay, I have seen this, I know this. But in one of the times, I was in this house where I was asking people about what they're suffering from. And it was a common thing that they were telling, because they are basically Palestinians who were in the Israeli side of the wall, but they're Palestinian with a green ID, which means they are from the West Bank, which also meant that they are illegally in Israel. But Israel put them in there. But they need a permit to be in their own house. But that permit needs also to give them like the exact street where they need to walk to go to the West Bank. So you live here, and you have a street, and let's say there's a school here, or there's a supermarket here. You are not allowed to cross the street for those, because you will be doing something illegal to your permit. So you need to go around next to the wall until the next checkpoint to cross. And people were always treating me with respect as someone coming with this official UN car and this official reports and questions. But in that case, there was this child in the room who disregarded this formal me. And he was very much asking his mom, when are you cooking مسخن? And he's like, wait, we have some important guest here, we finished, and then. And he really wanted that مسخن. مسخن, for those who don't know it, it's basically layers of bread with a lot of sammaq and a lot of onions and a bit of chicken and pimes. And that child was waiting for that dish, and I understood that my presence might delay his pleasure, so I should leave. And I kind of wrapped it up. And I was about to go. The mother was telling her child, I'm sorry, we cannot do it today. Your dad is away in Ramallah, and he cannot make it before the evening, and we don't have onions. You're seeing it coming. And the child was like, yeah, but can't we just go? And his mom no, we cannot cross the road. That's impossible. We cannot do that. We're risking basically being kicked out of our house to the West Bank. So no. And then the child looked at me and was like, what about him? And I looked back and I'm like, okay. And so I was on a mission again, and I went to that supermarket, which is ironic, how such a simple thing becomes such a big thing. I just crossed the road and I went to the supermarket and I bought onions. And funnily, when I was about to cross, a soldier stopped me. Stop. What's in the bag? Onions. Little they knew it was illegally smuggled. Thank you.
Thank you, Sobhi. Beautiful story. It made me laugh, actually, not only smile. And moussakhan is one of my favorite dishes. So thanks so much for this moment to have a bit of air. I would like to invite our next guest speaker to the stage, Tobias de Haan. Please come up, Tobias. So Tobias works for the European Legal Support Center. It's an organization defending and empowering the Palestinian solidarity movement by legal means. And Tobias, we're going to talk a bit about. You've made you did quite some research on the ways that Palestinian solidarity is being suppressed at this moment, but also for quite some time in Europe. Tobias, what sort of suppression does Palestinian solidarity encounter? Could you tell us a little bit about that? And you made some sheets. Should we put the first sheet on already, or Edwin, can you help with that? Great.
Perfect. Thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this. It's super important, and it's really good to see so many people here as well. So thank you all for coming. And so I just very quickly also wanted to introduce the ELSC as an organization, because I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with our work. The European Legal Support Center, or the ELSC for short, is kind of the first and only independent organization in Europe defending and empowering Palestine solidarity across different countries. So we work in different contexts, but we do have a specific focus on the Netherlands, the UK, and obviously also Germany, because I think a lot of people know that Germany is particularly bad. The UK is also very bad. And speaking up for Palestine in those countries can be very tough. And so my work is to monitor the repression of Palestine solidarity in these different countries. So what I do is that I look at how people speaking up for Palestine, organizations, activists and academics, how they face, a lot of different problems. And as you were asking, it can be people losing their jobs for publishing certain tweets. It could be people running into difficulties in their universities, students who maybe speak at protests, or academics who stand in solidarity, then get called into their supervisors to say, to kind of explain why they said certain things or why they published certain tweets, but also very real physical violence to protesters. I think we've all seen, or many of us will have seen, the videos from Amsterdam, from here, but also from the UK, from Germany, from Spain, from Italy also, where the police, is really very violent with people who really want a genocide to end. And of course, there's also artists or people who've been invited to have an exhibition or a panel or have, a certain engagement that is then cancelled for very vague reasons. What you see, especially in Germany, is people getting cancelled for having signed letters in support of BDS. So that is, of course, the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement that is calling for kind of a political isolation of Israel, very similar to what happened, obviously, with South Africa in the 80s and the 90s. So really, the repression is very broad, and it can happen to very many people. But it obviously affects different people in different ways. But what you see reproduced in the repression is colonial narratives. And obviously, it also interacts with racist sentiments that already exist in society, right? So you can also observe people facing literal deportation orders or their residency being somehow threatened because they were in a certain organization or they stood in solidarity. And it's a big problem, but we're fighting against it and we're giving people free legal support to do it.
That's great. That's a great initiative. So that deserves an applause. So I was wondering if you see a difference in the way and also in the the intensity with which the voices, the actions are being suppressed throughout Europe.
Yeah, I think from this first slide, it's pretty clear that there is a difference. From now, speaking now in May of 2024, kind of 8 months after the genocide began, there's definitely a difference, but also what's important to talk about is that the patterns and the things that we're seeing are not new. Rather, that what is new is, I think, an escalation in frequency and intensity of these incidents, and kind of, I think governments and lobby groups and societal actors who enact the repression, so to say, is broadening their scope, right? Like broadening their scope and really going very hard. So if we look at the graphs, there are 1,359 incidents that we've recorded since we started our monitoring project, which we started in 2019. And of these incidents, more than 1,000 have been recorded since October, and around 336 have been recorded before that time. And obviously, a big disclaimer to make here is also that we are just humans and we're not able to monitor everything. And what's very likely is that there's obviously more out there. There's people who are afraid to speak up but have maybe suffered repression. And that's very normal because there's a climate of fear, obviously, speaking around Palestine in certain contexts. But yeah, what we're seeing is not necessarily new, but also just really more intense and more frequent.
Can I ask you something? Did you have the impression that also before the 7th of October, there was a trend that the suppression was going up, that the activities were that they were getting more active wherever it comes from?
Yeah, that's a bit hard to say, but I would say that for sure over the past few years, I think 2019 is also kind of how the ELISI was created, was because, the last few years, I would say since 2016-17, we've seen with the adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which defines criticism of Israel, or at least a lot of forms of it, it conflates that with anti-Semitism, and that was then weaponized in a lot of countries to kind of stifle speech and activism on Palestine. And that was then adopted by a lot of countries. It was also going to be adopted by the UN before a lot of human rights organizations said, please, no, that's a bad idea. And then also the passing of anti-BDS motions in countries such as Germany and also the US, where speaking out in support of BDS or signing BDS letters or being a BDS activist was criminalized. And these were just policies, politicians telling themselves, we think this is bad, but it's not law, but it's used as law, right? And that's what's scary. So I think over the past few years, for sure, to answer your question, we've seen an escalation. And how do you register the incidents? Do people self-report, or do you follow the media and do or is it a combination of both? Just to see your methodology. Yeah, so we do both, and I can kind of make it visible with the next slide. This is kind of what we've seen over the last few years in Europe. So you can definitely see that the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany are our focus countries, and also where we see a lot, of the repression taking place. And many people report the incidents to us through our website, our kind of, social media channels, or our hotline in Germany. We have a hotline phone number. And also at the same time, we obviously look at news articles, we look at social media and try to really, see what's going on in the world and what kind of laws are being enacted. This, for example, is Germany. And here you see a breakdown of all the different incident types, because we record, obviously, incident per type. There's smear campaigns, which are a huge thing in Germany, where, for example, a lobby group starts a smear campaign by going to the right-wing press, like tabloid press, And then that gets picked up by the press, and that creates a storm, and then also politicians mingle in and say their things about it. And that, paired with what we call threat of legal action, is a huge topic in Germany, where say police arrests you for something, for having said, for example, from the river to the sea, or stop the genocide, or things of the sort. And then you get a letter from the police, and then you have to, come to the station, or you get charged with incitement to hatred, and then you have to go to court. And I just want to pause here and then say that I'm very aware that these things are quite, real and quite heavy, and people who face these legal troubles, it's not easy for them, especially for people who are financially maybe more vulnerable or racialized by, these European states. But we've also seen since October so many people standing in solidarity with us, and also just legal victories, because we believe that so much of the repression is not rooted in law. It's very often rooted in fiction, lobbying, and colonial silencing of people who want human rights abusers to stop. And for example, with Ghassan Abu-Sittah, we were able to overturn his ban in Germany, and we were also able to, in certain, parts of Germany, to get the From the River to the Sea slogan decriminalized, but also in the UK, we're supporting students who face deportation charges, academics and doctors who are facing, disciplinary investigations and actions. So I also want to emphasize that, we're also winning and fighting back. And the people who support us, we're really... Yeah, we're honestly super grateful for everyone that's supporting our work, because we're also, we're a collective of lawyers and non-lawyers doing this, and we don't believe that law is the fix for everything, obviously. It's not the only tool that we need to use, but sometimes it can be useful. And when it is, we do want to fight back with law, so yeah.
I think it's a very noble and also completely legal way of fighting, right? So how do you exactly support people? Of course, it depends on the matter, of course. But could you maybe give an example of? Well, of course, Abu-Sittah we already saw. But could you give us another example of something completely different that you did?
Yeah. So what happens is that different individual people just report to us and say, "This has happened to me. I would like to request legal support." We then have both an in-house team of lawyers specialized in different areas of law, but also legal networks in all the countries that we work in. So lawyers that don't directly maybe work for us, but we work with them, they have expertise in, say, migration law, media law, and then we try and see what we can do in their case and try to support them as best as we can. And for example, when people receive letters because they posted something online that is then being valued as, this or that, or the student encampments, for example, that are taking place right now. We're trying to also support them with getting legal kind of registrations, as a registered protest. This, we also protect the right to protest because it is a right. And even though the mayor of Amsterdam, and even though, in Germany, in the UK, university presidents, mayors, and politicians try to suppress and silence these people, they have a right to protest, and they are on the right side of history. So that's kind of also the stuff we do.
Great. And how can we support you or the ELSC in the Netherlands? Can you tell us a bit about that?
One thing is obviously to kind of amplify our work, to kind of look us out on the internet, find us, and find us.
Should we follow you on Insta or on?
I think I put it on the last slide as well. Our website is elsc.support. And there we, kind of post the news about our work, but also on Instagram, on Twitter, we tell people about what we're currently doing. We also publish the things that we monitor, the things that we see and maybe aren't always legally involved in. And we are always super, super grateful for any donations that, people can make, even if it's €1 a month, even if it's, one-time donations. because that's what this work needs. It needs solidarity from normal people coming together, because also, you know, we want to kind of demystify law as being exclusionary, elitist, which in many cases, sadly, if we're honest, sometimes it is. But we're trying to, you know, use this as a tool for the movement. And if the movement, can use our help, we're more than happy to support. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Tobias. Thank you for your important work. And I think that we are very grateful for initiatives such as these. I think that, well, in the Netherlands, we are, I think, once again, this week the coalition agreement was presented, and I thought, God, I hope we manage to keep the legal sector, the judicial power a bit in place, because I don't know what's going to happen when it comes from our legislative and executive power. So thank you very much for your noble fight and your legal fight, and we will make sure to follow him, to follow ELSC, and yeah, thank you, Tobias, for doing this important work and protecting freedoms.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next guest is Wieland Hoban. I would like to invite you on stage after telling who Wieland is. Where's my card? There you are. So Wieland is the chair of, or the president of Jüdische Stimme, the Jewish Voice for Peace in the Middle East. A German organization consisting of Jews that are anti-Zionist, or at least critical of Israel. Wieland identifies as an anti-Zionist Jew. He was the co-organizer of the Palestina Congress in Berlin, where Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah was supposed to speak. And yeah, please come on stage, because we would love to hear your experiences, Wieland. Welcome. I would also like to invite on stage Nabil. Nabil prefers to, remain a little bit anonymous. He will be here, of course, with his face and his first name, but he has encountered quite some difficulties already. Nabil is half Palestinian. He is a student activist who has been, well, basically, I think, since September, right? A bit before October 7th, he got very involved in the movement. He was also doing support work for the Congress, but he wants to keep a low profile. So we're very, very grateful that you are here to share your experiences of how suppression works. Can I invite you on stage, Nabil? And then our third guest on stage is Marloes van Noorloos. Marloes is an associate professor of criminal law at Leiden University. She made publications on hate crimes, movement restrictions for people suspected of planning to join terrorist groups, and criminal proceedings against participants of peaceful protests. And she will be sharing some knowledge about how this all works legally and what are the prognosis for the years to come, maybe. Marloes, could you please come on stage? Thank you. Nabil, I would like to start with you. This must be particularly, I don't know, I think it's already on, probably.
Hello? Hi.
Yeah, we hear you, I think. Yes. Nabil, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with, getting involved in the movement, and also, well, what was your first experience with your voice being basically suppressed?
I've been in Berlin for about 2 years, and I think as a Palestinian in Berlin, it's not even the question of your voice necessarily being repressed, but your voice is always repressed. Like, there's no spaces. Demonstrations being shut down and violently oppressed is a common occurrence. So I've been arrested, I've been detained a lot, I've been in events that were shut down, like the Palestine conference, but even getting a space to speak out for Palestine is a rarity in Berlin. And I've been active since, for 2 years now, but specifically since October for the specifically for the Palestine movement, and I was very involved in helping with the Palestine conference. This Palestine conference came out of sort of looking at, okay, we've been out on the streets for 3-4 months, but the government obviously didn't really seem to notice or care, or it didn't mark a shift in their rhetoric. And this conference came out of the want to get experts together to speak on what's happening and to have a unified voice in accusing the government of what they're doing. As in, the German government supplies 30% of weapons to the Israeli army. They are ideologically probably only behind America in their support of Israel. In the ICJ case, they were the first government to jump behind Israel against South Africa. They really don't shy away from full solidarity with a genocidal regime at the moment. And the Congress, everyone kind of saw what happened, I assume. We were violently stormed by the police. But the Congress itself also marked a shift, I think, in the repression we've been facing and the repression Palestinian Voice has been facing, because the whole idea of the Congress was to get Palestinians together to speak, and it was a completely illegal thing. I mean, this event today is like legal as well, as a conference would be. But the government obviously didn't care that we were all like within our rights, and still stormed it in complete there's no legal basis for it, what they did. And it marked a shift, as in, not only do they repress when we say something, but they repress now suddenly before we said something. And
what was their justification in the end for the way they acted, or was there no accountability anyway?
The official justification for why they banned it, what the police tweeted out afterwards, was that there was a risk of someone joining the conference who has said something anti-Semitic, and in the past there was a risk of something being said. Like, it wasn't that something had been said. This is the justification for banning a 3-day conference, and they banned it within 2 minutes of a speaker that they said had said something in the past. Like, it's so Orwellian, these justifications. And the next day, or I think 2 days after, our Minister of Interior, Nancy Faeser, went out and said that it was an Islamist conference, even though Wieland was a co-organizer and was the face of the conference a lot of times. And it just like, there was no sense in any of it in the end, but it didn't really matter for the government. And since then, they've also with Ghassan Abu-Sittah's ban, there was no justification for it, and obviously as soon as you have it in front of court, it's revoked.
Is that something that you see a lot in the German rhetoric to suppress the intersection with the like anti-Islamist movements in the country?
Yeah, Germany has since October really went back to their Staatsräson, this reason of being of the German state. Since the Second World War, it said that because of Germany's because they did the Holocaust, now they have, like, the reason of state was suddenly after Second World War being to support the Jewish people and support the Israeli creation. And like it was said before, the IHRA definition, which was adopted in Germany by the government, equates any anti-Zionist critique as anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitic critique is then pursuable by law, by the government. So really, I mean, yesterday we had a group in Duisburg, which like an activist group that was banned. Like the whole organization was banned from any political work again, and most likely the members themselves will be legally prosecuted. And the justification, they said that it was anti-Semitic and that it was Israel haters. But that's the whole justification. This is 2 sentences for a whole organization of people that have been active since September or October to be banned. There's nothing further than these things of, oh, they're anti-Semitic, so that's it.
And I assume that it's a bit like, isn't there any pushback from Parliament? I assume that there are people that are worried about this, because it sounds quite disturbing that you can just ban organizations without having a justification, a legal justification, or is it like very, very quiet?
I think, for example, I think it was November or December, this group in Germany, Samidun, which was a network of Palestinians mainly who fought for Palestinian prisoners in Palestine. And they were banned, but the whole whole political establishment jumped behind this banning of this group, because they said, well, they're Hamas supporters, so they deserve what basically happened to them. So, you know, Germany is very much behind the thinking of, we can tolerate things until they support terrorism. And I assume it's going to be the same with this group again, as in, you know, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly apply, like Ghassan Abu-Sittah said, to white people, basically, you know, to the general society, but not to the brown bodies, because they're not seen as full people under that law. What I would say is, for the conference that was banned, that marked a shift again in the rhetoric of political establishment. We had politicians that were against what we, political messaging, but then said what the government did in the conference, that was markedly too far. We had people that before the conference said, you know, we're Israel haters, we're this, we're that. We had even Zionists who afterwards said, okay, we hate those people, but what you did to them, that was too far, because it infringes on everyone's fundamental rights all of a sudden. And it creates precedents. Right,
absolutely, yeah. I would like to go to Wieland, because you, when we were preparing this this session, we talked about you as being Jewish and the strange dynamics that occur in the weaponization, basically, of the fight against anti-Semitism. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this weaponization has been taking place not only in Germany, of course, in the UK and the US. It's been a major force, especially in connection with the IHRA definition. And I think the meaning of the very term has become eroded in such a way that it hardly serves any purpose anymore except a bad faith purpose. And it's reached the point where I think probably statistically, if you were to look at a handful of anti-Semitism accusations that have come up and see, okay, how many of these are based on statements about Israel? And it's clear that it will be the vast majority. And there's a complete double standard also in how speech relating to, let's say, the broad complex of Israel, Jews, how these are treated depending on the political context. So any harsh criticism of Israel will be deemed anti-Semitic, or, well, first of all, will be taken as a statement about Jews, because you say, okay, Israel stands for Jews, it's the Jewish state. It is, some people have even used the collective Jew as a term. I find that a very unpleasant term. But in any case, they will first of all say, okay, when people say Israel, what they really mean is Jews. So there's always this element of kind of insinuation and suspicion, saying that everything is a dog whistle, basically. And then, whereas when you have far-right affiliations among say, conservative politicians, that, which normally have anti-Semitic elements as well, as you would expect on the far right, then one doesn't see anywhere near the same level of outrage or also scrutiny from the authorities and the media. So really then what this shows is that it's not really about Jews, or certainly not about all Jews. It's really more about Israel. And if one understands a bit also about the political and historical context of what Israel means in Germany, then actually you come to realize that it's also about Germany itself, so that attacks on Israel are seen by the system, and in a sense they are actually also attacks on Germany.
That's interesting. Can you just take us one step further in that reasoning? Because I think that there are also, like, this happens in the Netherlands as well. We are quite similar, I think, to what happens in Germany. But what do you mean exactly by attacks on Israel? It's an attack on us Germans?
Well, there are some more general and more specific aspects to this. So at the general level, we have this whole narrative, we all know the slogan, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And what that really means is that it's the last remaining Western colony in the Middle East. And so in that sense, an ideologically motivated attack on Israel is an attack on Western imperialism, first of all. And then in the case of Germany, it's also an attack on a kind of hypocritical culture of moral atonement and supposed historical responsibility in the wake of the Holocaust. And what I really want to emphasize is that this is the cover story, and this is what a lot of ordinary people believe, but it's not what actually motivates the ruling class and the government. And a Jewish comrade in Berlin recently put it very succinctly. He said, "It's not about Auschwitz; it's about NATO." Yeah, I don't mean to take credit for his words, but yeah, I thought he put it very well. But so that's the general Western aspect. But in Germany, the idea actually since the 1950s has been, how do we rehabilitate Germany after this real moral shame after the Holocaust? Because it wasn't just a matter of losing a war; it was really a matter of losing standing. And you're thinking, this idea of Germany is the country of, Bach, Mozart, Goethe, whatever. There's this phrase in German, the country of poets and thinkers, right? All these noble values, etc. And then they carry out this Holocaust. So there was this incredible shame, and the first chancellor after the war, Konrad Adenauer, he worked out that an important kind of fast-track route to being a player on the international stage again would be to establish good ties with Israel. And, he didn't do that out of the particular, I wouldn't say love for Jews. He in fact said that one should not underestimate the influence of the Jews, which is the sort of statement one might expect to hear from people who don't like Jews very much. But he saw that then establishing ties with Israel, and already from the 1950s selling arms to Israel and paying reparations, that this was a way for Germany to look better after the years of shame. And that's been really internalized by the political establishment, sometimes more under the surface, sometimes more visibly. And I think really since the 80s, I mean, it had become a bit more of just a standard way of functioning, but then from the 80s, people started really being demonstrative about it again, and saying that this is our great moral responsibility, and all this sort of rhetoric, and yeah, unfortunately, there are ordinary people who believe that, who don't see just the cynicism and the national or imperialist interest behind it. Germany is still the second biggest arms supplier to Israel. They make a lot of money out of their supposed guilt. But yeah, there are a lot of people, though, if you speak to them, you can still, I guess depending on their age, people in their 20s, of course it's further away for them. But you can still sort of activate this sense of responsibility, and among those who just aren't so informed, or maybe just who censor their own thoughts a bit more, there's still this feeling that they can't really attack Israel in any substantive way, that, or at least not as Germans, that maybe they understand if other people do, but they don't feel that they have the right as Germans to say certain things or even to think certain things. There's a great culture of obedience in Germany.
Right, yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. This is very, very interesting, and it must be such a difficult place for you to navigate with your identity that is at the same time you are Jewish, but you are also like anti-Zionist. Do you? Well, it's a bit of a stupid question maybe in these times, but do you feel safe? How is it with your feelings of safety?
Well, I think safety is always relative, and generally the people who get arrested most at these demonstrations are not usually the ones with the lightest skin. So, part of our job also, I mean, as an organization, as activists, is to point this out, and to point out also that the struggle for Palestinian rights is part of the international anti-racist struggle, that this is not just a particularist issue, because that's one of the big problems also in the German understanding of anti-Semitism, that often it doesn't lead to any kind of introspection about, racial, ethnic discrimination. It's just taken as this particular issue because that's the one that has been treated as most important in German history. Whereas most people, they couldn't care less about the Namibian genocide, for example, because those were black Africans, and it wasn't happening in Europe. And I mean, and I'm pretty sure that if the Holocaust had only been carried out against Eastern European Jews, who are more religious, more traditional, wearing with the traditional appearance, I think also that the West would have cared less about that as well than about, these more obviously white, middle-class, Western Jews.
They were more exotic Jews,
more racialized, you might say.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. This is really interesting. I would like to go to Marloes because you can maybe, like, what I hear a lot from actually what happened the whole afternoon is there's a lot of legal muddy waters, right? And there's like very firm action, but basically with a very vague legal basis. What are your reflections on that, as like with the legal point of view?
Yes, thank you. So to start with, I think indeed when you look at the right to freedom of expression, also as the European Court of Human Rights, a very important body in that respect, as it interprets this right, in a very famous case from a few years ago, Baldassi, they have made it very clear that there is a right to boycott. This was a case about activists, BDS activists, boycotting Israeli products in supermarkets, and they were prosecuted for incitement to discrimination. The European Court did not accept this and found a violation of the right to freedom of expression because it's very important to be able to protest, especially, gross human rights violations, and people have to be able to stand up against that and not being criminalized. And this has been quite a revolutionary development, because earlier case law by the same court was less progressive, so to say. So now we have quite a clear legal development here. However, what you see in reality, indeed, and as we've seen with Ghassan's ban as well, it's so easy to ban people and to fight these bans. It takes time, and it takes legal action. And once the legal action is fortunately successful, then much harm has already been done. Smear campaigns, etc. It's it goes on so many different fronts. Bank accounts that do not work anymore, etc. And I think, as a background to all of these developments, on the one hand, indeed, the weaponization of anti-Semitism, as you rightfully pointed out, with the IHRA definition. I'm not sure if everybody is aware of what the definition is, but it's basically a definition by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance of anti-Semitism. It was meant to strengthen the fight against anti-Semitism by providing quite a vague definition with some examples, and also pointing out that harsh criticism of Israel, if other countries are not criticized in the same way, then that might point to anti-Semitism. But the whole definition was never meant by its makers to be used for legal purposes, because it is too vague for that. But it's been promoted around the world by Israel and its allies, and used in ways that stifle free speech. So that's one element, and I think actually this weaponization of anti-Semitism in this way doesn't help the actual fight against anti-Semitism, which is very important. So there's been some developments. It's interesting, the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism is an alternative kind of definition made by scholars and organizations, which does a much better job in many respects, although you can still think about other definitions. But I am afraid that this whole vague definition and all of the developments from Israel that come with it have already led to so much damage. But I hope there is room for thinking in a different way about fighting anti-Semitism now. Another related development, I think, in the legal sphere has been the fight against terrorism since 9/11, especially, has led to very harsh laws in all kinds of fields over the whole world, also in Europe and in many European countries, in EU law as well. Where not just terrorist acts are criminalized, which is of course logical, but also a very broad range of expressions, including expressions such as glorification of terrorism. And these kinds of laws are now, they have always been used very much, I think, against what is called Islamic terrorism, to target Muslim speech. And at this moment, I think these kinds of laws are also very much behind many of these legal campaigns. And like the Schengen information system, for instance, with the ban that Ghassan was a victim of. These kinds of systems also use these very broad definitions of terrorism, including all these kinds of expressions, so that almost everything falls under terrorism at a certain point, and you can use it in very broad ways. Well, fortunately, the ban was lifted now, but I'm not optimistic about, well, how these systems can work in the future.
Does it? Thank you. Does it help? Because I can imagine that, for example, this how do you call it? Not a verdict, but a ruling by the judge in Potsdam, for example, on Ghassan Abu-Sittah, and also the jurisprudence that's come from the ELSC actions. Does it help? Does it form like a shield to protect the basic rights to counter this movement?
Yes, absolutely. It's very important, and I admire the work that you do. I think it creates precedents, and it creates possibilities to continue to stress the right to freedom of expression, the right to protest, and to show also as examples to other countries that within these legal systems, these rights have to be upheld.
Great. And just a question to have a bit of a reflection on the Dutch situation. Of course, this new government coalition agreement has been presented with a number of, I think, disturbing announcements. What is your prognosis? How is this going to develop in your legal view?
Yes, some of the plans included targeting terrorism and glorification of terrorism even harsher. So I'm not optimistic about what that would mean. They want to change, I think, the criminal code as well to be able to act more easily against these kinds of expressions. So what that would mean in practice, let's hope that it will all end very soon in some way. I'm not sure how, but
we didn't even start yet. So thank you so much. We are in 10 minutes. It's 5. It flew by. I would really like to give the opportunity to the audience to ask a number of questions.
Could I maybe just add something about the Congress?
Of course.
Because the Congress became famous, you might say, for not being able to happen.
Right.
Even though I did think it was actually a victory already that it began at all, because people were really trying to ban it from weeks beforehand. But after this experience, and after many experiences of activists having their spaces taken away, and of any event always having the danger of a space cancellation, the organizational team of the Congress has decided also to purchase a space that can be used permanently for Palestine-related events.
It's a great idea.
And that there will also soon be a fundraising campaign that'll be launched in order to make this possible. So watch this space.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. We will watch it. Nabil?
May I add to that as well that the importance of the space is also that Berlin is home to one of the biggest or the biggest Palestinian diaspora in Europe, and that the German government is set up in this way that a lot relies on state funding. So we've seen these last 6 months a lot of vital spaces. I mean, they shut down Oyun, which is a cultural space in Germany, in the Palestinian, in a space with a lot of Palestinians. They just last week, even in conjunction with the Congress, shut down 2 centers for women at risk. That was now overturned for this year because of public pressure, but this space is also vitally important because the German state has made it impossible to not to do any sort of events. For the Congress, we had high-ranking politicians calling for private private venues to reject us. I mean, from all levels of government, we had people against us only for wanting to speak up. So this importance is also not only for the organizers, but for Palestinian culture in the diaspora in Germany.
Thank you. All right, I saw a hand going up there. Edwin, can you help with the microphone?
Thank you very much. My question is about the complicity of media, mainstream media. I haven't heard it today in these 2 hours, that how complicit the media is. We're not allowed to make statements, but just to say, I'm Turkish, and I'm really like... we know that the press is not free in Turkey. It's fine, we know that, everybody knows, and you take the measure in the papers when you're reading them. And I started pitying people in the Netherlands and Europe, thinking that their press is free, while there's a huge censorship on what's happening, and their complicity in the whole thing, and they're just moving along with the governments. So this needs to be called out, and I'm curious about it. Not only this, but also Sara, perhaps, and how they're experiencing it in the Netherlands.
Thank you. Yeah. So the media. Well, perhaps. You are, of course, in the German media landscape. You're probably not following. So perhaps, Sara, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. What we've seen is that whenever we do an activity, it's always kind of a struggle to get the attention of the media. There's a very quick and attempt to kind of frame it in a certain way. I do have to say, if I'm being quite honest, there seems to be a slight improvement in the last couple of months, because even people within the media are looking at what's online and what's in their newspaper and their news outlets, and they're seeing the discrepancy. And there's been recently a letter signed with hundreds of journalists and writers saying, this is not possible, we need a ceasefire, we need to be able to talk about this. And I think that one of the things that came to mind also hearing this is this very famous sentence that said, well, when they came for the Jews, I didn't say something because I wasn't Jewish, and when they came for the Gypsies, I didn't say something because I wasn't Gypsy, and when they came for me, there was no one left to defend me. And what I think that we need to realize here in Europe is that when they came for the doctors, and we don't defend them because they're doctors far away, and when they come for the journalists in Gaza, but we don't defend them because they're journalists far away, and when they come for the students, the way they have never come for farmers being active or hooligans being active with the same level of aggression, and we say, well, I'm not a student and it's not my problem. The question is going to be, who's going to be there for us when it's our turn?
Thank you, Sara. I see a question there, Edwin.
What I miss in the Western countries, I'm half Spanish, half Moroccan, born in the Netherlands. So I have an advantage reading in different languages. Let's say on the topic of education, which is very important, because in the West it's like people think that history started in 1940, and this is very disturbing. And the second thing is that we have seen Nicaragua and Colombia now that will file the case at the ICJ. It's very important to understand the interconnection of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Colombia with Palestine. And here in the West, the last centuries, or the last decades, we heard that Cuba is a dictator. Colombia is dictator. Venezuela is dictator. So it's important to do more research on that, because I've been working in the medical industry.
What is your question? Sorry.
And the question is, okay, is there audience, or is there a possibility to make this more, to bring this more to the surface. Because we know Cuba about, when we talk about Cuba, we think about salsa and Cuba Libre, but there is more. So my question is there something that can be started by your bigger organizations on the interconnections of these countries with Palestine? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't know who I would be able to ask the question. I think that there is a lot of intersections in liberation movements and in the fighting of oppression worldwide with the Palestinian movements. Nabil, I see you nodding your head. Perhaps you can elaborate a bit on that?
I think we've been seeing, there's a sentence that goes around of Palestine is all of our liberations, or like no one is free until Palestine is free. And I think what we've seen since October is that Palestine is such a clear example of Western imperialism, is that it's impossible for people that are following what's happening to not see what Europe is doing everywhere else. And it's also awakened people through Palestine to all these other struggles. I mean, we've suddenly been hearing people talk about Congo and Sudan, which they would not have done as much if Palestine wasn't happening. I mean, as a Palestinian, it's always this thing of, it's so, like it hurts so much to see how much Palestine has to suffer for people to wake up. But it's also in a way a pride of us as Palestinians are making the world wake up, as in because of our steadfastness and because of our 70 years of struggle, people, we're also making people wake up to the global south as a whole.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nabil. It is already 5, but I see some hands. Shall we do 3 questions and then I'll liberate you from this hot, dark place? The lady here in the blue. And if you have to go, of course, I cannot keep you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, to Wieland and Nabil, did you ever think about going online with the Palestina Congress? Because that they cannot prohibit.
Well,
That's what you think.
I see significant looks here. Wieland, would you like to answer, or Nabil?
Well, they did try and ban Ghassan Abu-Sittah from actually joining online. They threatened him in Berlin at the airport that if he was to join online, there would be a prison sentence, which, since when does Germany have jurisdiction in the UK? But yeah, we are definitely, I mean, like Wieland said, like the Congress was exceptionally successful in making the world see how restrictive Germany is, but it did silence us. I mean, it did, in effect, silence all the panelists we had involved, but in no way are we letting ourselves be silenced. I mean, the Palestine Congress is ongoing, and we will still keep our voices up, and we will announce things in the future, but it's definitely not that we're just going to be silent and sit down because the German state basically forced us to.
And can I maybe just regarding also the question, which, I mean, as would be reasonable, assumed that surely one can't forbid that as well. But I would say that, you know, in the last decade, it's become common to speak of a sort of post-truth world. But I think in Germany, there's also a kind of post-law situation, especially in Berlin. In Berlin, it's at a higher level than in most other places in the country, but there are still some manifestations. It's like when you have to force the state to actually follow its own rules, which of course costs time and money and effort, which not everybody has. And so, you know, whether it's a demonstration ban or an unlawful firing, you know, these are things which the state can do without it being based on a law, just because they can. And to really change it, then you have to go through the laborious process of doing something about it. And maybe in the end, you know, they'll say you're right, but then maybe even that won't actually have any consequences, because maybe, you know, this thing is no longer relevant to the present. Like, for example, if the legal challenge to the Congress ban, you know, if it were to be ascertained that yes, it was against the law, etc., you know, it's a bit late in the day.
It's too
right?
late, right? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Edwin, you have the next one ready?
Thank you. I feel that a lot of common people, just like we are, have felt a lot of helplessness in the past months and feeling like we can't really do something about the situation, the genocide, everything that is playing out in front of our eyes. You have beautifully described the narrative, but I would like to ask for an imperative, and this is a question to all the speakers. What do you think every individual person sitting here can do to help the cause, to support it, and to take something away that we can give to other people? Thank you.
Very good question. Wow, wow. Who feel? Oh, yeah, Sophie, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I would say, yeah, one of the things I liked about the reaction that I felt after October as a Palestinian was just sometimes people asking, how are you? I think if you know any Palestinian or anyone who is very involved in what's happening in Palestine, just try to send them love. If you have a bit of money, try to donate to some organizations. And if you have a bit of time, try to advocate. And you don't even need to be the creative voice. You can just echo what others are saying. I think if each person in this room and beyond this room would do that, there will be a lot of waves happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Sara, keep it short.
And I think that one of the ways that you can also help is speak out. So there is a lot of censor and self-censor going on. And when one person is more outspoken, there's going to be a lot of people trying to cut that person down. And it's very helpful if a lot of people that maybe don't have a very loud voice or on the forefront will say, well, it's not that bad. I mean, why not? Just asking the question really clearly, why not? Why wouldn't we divest from Israeli University that are contributing to militarization of a genocide? Why wouldn't we do that? Because I think there's a very big group that maybe didn't grow up with a lot of knowledge about the history of Palestine, but that is starting to get the feeling that something is off. They cannot quite put their fingers on it, but something is off. And I think that asking questions and supporting the people that speak up can have a very big impact in that.
That's a good addition. I think we have only time for one more. There's so many. Excuse me. Yeah, you can shout it. I will amplify it. Great. Did everybody hear that? You can send Tweede Kamerleden, members of parliament, you can send them emails. You can bomb them with emails. I'm just doing a suggestion here.
May I add one last?
Sorry. Oh, Nabil.
One last action.
Yeah, this is
go support the students.
Absolutely. Yes.
Go to your. If you want to help Palestinians, right after you leave here, go to the next student encampment. You know, go support the people that are out on the street right now, that are risking their livelihoods, that are risking their physical health, and go support them. You know, whatever they need. If the police is going to storm them, try to stand between them. Try to show that these people are not alone. Try to support the people that are out there and show them that you're not alone. You know, there's people out there on the streets risking themselves. Support them. Support the students.
Great. I see Edwin standing, but can I'll just walk to you because Edwin is in the back. And then afterwards the lady in the back, and then I fear it's done. Oh my God, there's one more. I'm holding the microphone.
Nee, ik wil alleen zeggen, boycott, boycott, boycott.
That's a good idea as well. There are very good apps for that, and also the BDS website gives a lot of information on how not to buy into occupation. Thank you for the addition. Edwin.
Yeah, my question was regarding social media and advocating, echoing. What we see is there's a lot of censorship by Meta, And my question is for Marloes. It seems like they get away with it. I am very ignificant in terms of followers. I have a small account, but even I am restricted all the times. When I try to share, I try to follow, I try to like. I always have problems. What are the steps you as
yeah, the legal steps,
legal way.
Yeah. It's a very good question because indeed the social media platforms often tend to follow those very broad definitions of anti-Semitism, of terrorism, and then ban a lot, and then shadow banning is a big problem as well. Well, one very concrete action that might be interesting now, so Meta has an oversight board. So it's an independent board that has to rule on whether Facebook, for instance, can ban a certain expression. And they have now a call for, open input for a few cases that are about speeches such as "from the river." And they haven't banned these particular speeches, and now they're asking, and they have to rule about, they're sort of the constitutional court of Meta, so to say. They have to rule about, what about these cases? And people can provide information as well, so that's one thing that I am at least going to do from my perspective. So there are also ways to put pressure there and to complain, of course, but I'm not sure if people really get a reaction to that when they do so. But you can at least complain in these cases on their website.
Can we find these ways as well? If we look up the ELSC, for example, Tobias, are you linking to this sort of like complaint or report mechanisms?
Yeah, we do. We obviously take all kinds of repressions, also in online environments. So please do report that to us. That the link for that website is elsc.support/intake. But also we cooperate with an organization called Hamle, and they are all about, it's a Palestinian organization, all about online advocacy and how it's being, repressed in certain contexts. So please also check them out. It's written 7AMLEH on the web.
Great. Thank you so much. I see a hand. Is it a very short intervention? Okay. I'll come to you and I'll hold the mic.
Okay. As you said, you were planning on buying a space. But as we can see from what happened with the Congress, or groups like Die Linke Berlin, or like Die Linke and German groups that we, or before this, have seen as left, supported the banning of the Congress. And we can see that we cannot get our rights through reform. What do you say we do then?
If not reform, what then?
Revolution!
Intifada!
Intifada! Revolution! Intifada! Revolution!
Before someone starts complaining about the word intifada, it's only Arabic for uprising. So just to clear that out. Any last words on what to do if not with reform? Briefly.
I think, like the last 6-7 months have also shown that the governments don't respond to much except if we force them to. That across the board, polls have shown that the majority of people are against the genocide. The majority of people are against the government's complicity. But like you said, the new contract came out, but it's completely the opposite of what the people want. Same in Germany, we have 60% of people against the genocide. Doesn't matter. The state has shown again and again they will only change something if they're forced to. In the past, we were able to stop apartheid in South Africa because of civil disobedience, because people stopped supporting the apartheid state, stopped shipping things there, did sit-ins, just like that's happening now. That's why I say support the students, because they are fed up and they're saying, we've tried everything we can, they're not going to help. We're going to take what we can get from the state. We're going to force them to act if they won't act through our voting. these types of initiatives, you know, students, protests.
Thank you, Nabil. Yeah. Absolutely. This has brought us to the end of this afternoon. I would like to thank all the speakers that were here, Wieland, Nabil, Marloes, Tobias, and of course, Dr. Abu-Sittah. I don't think he's still watching us. And of course, Sophie, how could I forget you? And Sara, you were in my blind spot and you were right in front of me. Incredible. It was, well, I found it an enriching afternoon. I found myself also surrounded by people who are, wrestling and fighting for a struggle that is not ending yet, but we are making steps forward, I think. So there's also, I'm leaving this room also with hope. Let's stay awake, let's stay loud. Support human rights organizations, support advocacy groups such as the Rights Forum. There is a QR code there. If you scan it, you go right to our website. You can make a donation. Donate to the other initiatives. I think we can put up links on our website in our report of this session. And I would like to end with a quote by one of my favorite philosophers, Hannah Arendt, a Jewish German philosopher, on the need to stay together. Action is never possible in isolation. To be isolated is to be deprived of the capacity to act. So let's stick together, let's stay loud, and let's stay awake. Thank you so much.